So I think this fireside chat actually extends. This is kind of the ongoing theme for the last few days. I mean, that's kind of why we're all here. So I think this is just an opportunity and extension to continue the conversation, which obviously is what needs to happen. And I'm excited to be up here with you guys.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot, and even just in conversation when we're standing out, we felt like we were having this chat out in the common area out there a minute ago. So I guess I'm just going to start with a few questions. I'll start with Vanessa. One of the things that we kind of talked about was, are there different strategies that you think work best for different subsets of youth? Because, we have already said that they're all different. So are there different strategies that we need to take?
And that's a really great question. Thank you for that. It's really important to understand. So first, I want to give just a little bit about my background to give some context. The nonprofit that I represent, we service all the way from 5 years old all the way through the lifespan, to the end of the lifespan, whatever that might look like through our seniors program. And really, it's all about a different perspective. Keeping in mind that youth suicides have gone up dramatically just in the past 4 years alone, and keeping that in mind in terms of not just remediation, but prevention as well. Really understand that we need to meet them where they are, whether they're 5, 55, or 105. And so that important thing is really kind of having a toolkit to understand and be able to pull different tools, realizing, okay, depending on how you're presenting, where you are, what you're facing, what your individual challenges are, being able to, whether it's using a call center, whether it's using a community-based service, going inside of the home, whether it's a school-based service, which we do as well through our affiliate organizations. It's not so much totally based on age, because some of them, even though their biological age could be 60, mentally they might be 15. And so that's really important, one of those variables to keep in mind, that we want to meet them where they are, but a proper assessment is the most important piece. So.
And I like how you utilize the word toolbox. I'm Heather Fonstock, and I have a Waterview, which is a nonprofit private school for grades 6 through 12. And for learning differences, we even use that. I use that strategy of toolbox. Each kid needs their own toolbox on what learning looks like for them, because no two people learn the same. Even in this room today, we were taught the same way a lot of times, but we didn't learn it the same way. And some of us are still waiting to catch up. I'm still learning. And I think it's important the toolbox needs to expand beyond just the mental health, because for youth, the academic is a trigger for their mental health. So sometimes giving them those toolboxes are also very beneficial.
Well, I think everything we've talked about in the last 2 to 3 days is kind of a culmination of coming together here. And for me, I love the story that Lexus shared. Thank you for sharing that, Lexus, about being considered slow in math. Well, for me, I just had different ways of processing it. And I was put in remedial math till the 6th grade. What made me passionate about teachers is because I got to a teacher in the 7th grade. It says, you understand math. And one of the things I loved was stories and words in English, and she will always put math in a story. And fast forward, I end up being an engineer working with NASA by the time I was 19. So, yeah. I worked at Sunstrand Hamilton, and we worked on different things with airplanes and all those different things. And it was the strategy. It was, and that's what made me passionate about being a learning strategist. Like, until they told Lexus what it was, she took control and power over it, and it was like, oh, I can do this. once they told me that I just process in such detailed levels, you know, and she just said, hey, it's the difference between learning how a clock works versus learning how the gears work inside of the clock to make the clock work. I was one of the type of people that need to know the gears. And I can build a clock and tell you what time it is. And that's, and I want to appreciate your work in mathematics. And I think that was a very important question that Heather asked of you, because you probably deal with different math strategies. You come across students, you know, however you needed to build your platform, you had to come across different things in different ways that people would process in order to understand the math question, the equation, and how to solve it. And the strategy was simple.
Oops, sorry. Right on cue.
Yeah.
That's my alarm. Apparently, we're supposed to be doing something right now.
What are you supposed to be doing?
I don't know.
Okay, well, maybe that's just basically the strategy is just like puzzle pieces. Each piece is unique and different. And the strategy is to ask the questions and to learn what unlocks that learning. And from there, believe it or not, some mental well-being started to happen, because then as a child I got encouraged and I got motivated and I think I can do it, and then it went on to algebra and blah, 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 and it's all circular. It's all an ecosystem. And I think we don't give enough credit to people who create math apps, people who create their own school from scratch. You got to listen to this woman's story here. And for people who work in mental health all day, every day. And these are the heroes. But we are the strategy. And everybody in this room is a strategist, or else you wouldn't even be here. And so you're all warriors implementing what needs to be done when it comes to our youth. And I like that you said they might be 60, but the mind of a 15-year-old. And that also goes with people who might have a high IQ, but maybe their EQ needs some help.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just taking it one step at a time, one person at a time, and being compassionate one level at a time.
Well, and something else that was triggered throughout this morning, and kind of we are here and have surrounded ourselves. You know, one of the questions for a lot of us as individuals was, you know, how did we get to where we are, or how do we self-help and self-soothe? Well, we surround ourselves with people, and I guess my question is to you all, what are we going to do to help these students? Because the students don't know, they don't have the communication set. They don't know how to create their personal board of directors. They don't know how to gather those tools. And I see too many times they do turn to their peers who are not licensed, and they're self-soothing, and they're blasting it on social media, and of course getting from all kinds of stuff. So I guess my question, you know, how do we do that? You know, how do we go on and encourage them to create a healthy personal board of directors?
That's a good question. You want to answer that, Vanessa?
Sure. I love that question, because it's so easy to get caught up in talking about the problem that we could talk about that for an entire conference and not even bridge the gap to even think about solutions. And really kind of focusing on the solution aspect of it. First, we need to really, it always starts with funding and research, getting empirically based data so we can really figure out what are some evidence-based strategies that we can use, and not just use and talk about it and publish it, but implement it as well. Implementation is the most important thing. I do think that it's really important that we start to create a dialogue, right, where the youth are comfortable talking about things. If they're not comfortable talking about it, we're going to have outdated data and practices that don't really connect with them, right? And that's what we've been doing. I feel like culturally we've been kind of understanding ever since, especially 2020, like, wait a minute, we don't know what's happening with them anymore. They're communicating, like my colleagues have said, they're communicating amongst themselves, but here we are as the caretakers, the parents, the educators, the supporters, the community, and we don't really know. We're a little bit outside of the circle. And meanwhile, we're just kind of observing what's happening, whether it's dramatically rising suicide rates or crime rates, absenteeism. Like, we're seeing the results, but we're not seeing exactly what's about to happen because we're not involved in the conversations. So I think the first thing is really the funding, understanding that the funding is going to create the programs, and the programs are going to create the opportunities and the environments for them to feel like, oh, okay, I can talk about this. It's okay. Creating those safe spaces without consequence, that they feel supported. The way how their mind works is they're not going to open up. If they feel like you don't really care about them, I don't care what you say. I don't care if you're licensed. I don't care if you've been practicing for the past 40 years. They will not open up. They only care about what you know when they feel like you genuinely care about them. And from then, we can really use that as a springboard for solutions.
Yeah, and I agree with that. They're not going to open up. And we have actually found in our community, I actually started I call it AA for kids. It's a chat group. And while they might not talk and open up individually, they'll come as a group. They'll come with their peers. And so, while I continued my education, that's what I do on Thursdays. I bring them in with somebody that's certified and licensed, and they're able to kind of have that mental health group and open up a little bit. And it takes trust. And I don't know how we're going to establish that, because somewhere along the line, these kids have lost trust in an adult. And it's just sad. And that's, I think, the biggest component. And in order to get them to open up is getting them to trust.
And in our schools, KIPP, North Carolina, we have learning coaches and learning strategists working along with the teachers and the students. We also are implementing social workers in our schools. And just recently finished working with some advocacy work and getting more funding so we can get more mental health professionals into our schools. So if you have influence and ability to make something happen, use your voice, because apparently these strategies, if I know they can work in the school, then I'm going to advocate for that as my position as a board member. And I'm going to help find that funding. That's part of what we're supposed to do. When they come to us and tell us they have a need, our job is to fulfill it. So you are advocates, and you have the ability. But I know putting those things into our schools, that's how we're helping our youth. Those are strategies that we're using to help our youth.
Another question that kind of comes to mind, at least since we're kind of focusing on the youth portion of it right now, do you find that the youth have a hard time even on navigating and locating a number or a resource in the moment, or do you feel like it's really face forward and they know where they could go if they needed it?
No, because when they're young, they're still developing their ability to be articulate. And a lot of times, again, their EQ, their maturity, so they might act out and they may have behavior. So I wish the answer was yes, but in reality, no, a lot of times they don't know in the moment. No. And unfortunately, the teachers don't know in the moment either.
No, but I mean, I can remember, and I don't know about you guys, but I knew growing, there was all kinds, don't say no to, there were all kinds of bullying, I don't want to call them gimmicks, but marketing tools to put these things in the hands of these kids. I know say no to drugs and DARE and all of these programs that were out there. The commercials were, every time we turn on the TV. Why, I don't understand. Why don't we continue to do that? If they're going to at least turn it, okay, don't do TV commercials, but social media. Oh my God, put it on Twitter, something. They'll find it.
I was just getting some social media lessons from Vanessa. I think she can probably talk about some of those strategies of, because I know right now, you're right, the commercial ads, that they're not working for the youth today.
And I was just thinking about that as you were talking, just kind of realizing like, wow, it really has changed a lot. The messaging has changed. Our youth are getting a lot of messages, but what are these messages, right? The goals are different, you know. Like you said, when we were coming up, it was very clear. You know, they had the frying pan with the egg. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. We all understood and we all received very consistent messaging from the same communication channel, right? Now it's completely different. Now they might be on TikTok, they might be on Instagram, they might just kind of be surfing the web. We're not really sure where they're getting, and not just the platform itself, right? But who are on these platforms. They could be connected to hundreds, thousands of, or hundreds of thousands, depending on if they're an influencer. So they're connecting to all of these people that we don't even know about, receiving, I'm sure, conflicting messages, because I know that we receive conflicting messages all the time, you know. I saw a meme the other day and I could totally relate, you know. It's like, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure to eat more meat because meat has protein and protein builds muscle, and that's how you're healthy, the animal diet, right? And then someone else comes along and they're like, no, meat's horrible, meat's bad, you need to stay away from meat, eat lots of veggies. And then someone else says, no, I haven't eaten veggies in 5 years, I'm the healthiest I've been all my life, you know. There's nothing you can do that's going to be very clear and consistent anymore, even as adults, right? With all of our IQ and EQ, I don't know what's healthy anymore. Clearly, I don't know. And the messaging is not consistent for them as well. So we don't really know where they stand on any particular topic. And I don't think they're consistent either, because they might receive messaging and they could be 12 years old and receive messaging and think one thing. And by the time they're 14, they've completely changed because they were influenced by messaging that's conflicting.
And that's because we're not teaching kids in these classrooms about proper research and primary sources and secondary sources. And, you know, social media is not a primary source. And so the young lady, say your name again. HIPAA? We're just going to go with that. I usually try to work with names because they were very important to me that I say people's name correctly. She said something that I know resonates with anybody that has been disenfranchised for any reason, for any of the reasons you can check the boxes on diversity. When you said that your health is impacted about your housing and being able to claim the land and whatever, and that goes even further, as you know, because I'm sure it could be a long list, but I think that was so important because education, you know, and they were saying the statistics are when literacy decreases, crime increases. Yeah. And so education is connected to mental and physical well-being. And some of the strategies that I think that we could do for our youth is find ways based on their ability to be more physical. We need to put PE back into these schools as a requirement. We need to put, you know, other types of sports. I love basketball, football, but you know, when I was growing up in Illinois, our schools had resources. I mean, we had line dancing. I remember country square dancing, and I remember fencing. Yeah, fencing, right? Swimming, all of that. It changes your mental well-being. And Crystal talked about 10 and 6, right? She's not talking about hand positions on when you're driving. She's talking about sleep. You know, we used to have rest period in school. Yes. And so education is very key as a strategy. The more resources we can put into education for these kids, I think we'll also see mental and physical well-being going up without them having to look for sources outside of doing something more tactile.
And to piggyback on what you just said. I know we only have a few more minutes, but changing the schedule and putting, physical education, but what about recess? It's like it goes away. Last time I checked, students that are in 6th through 12th grade, they're still kids. And they still need that break. And I don't understand why we don't have a recess period, not just lunch. We all need that, like I said the other day, a smoke break. And they need it. They need to go out and be kids, because once they turn 18, the world's a totally different beast. And I think they need that opportunity.
Absolutely. And we're starting to prioritize that, as I mentioned earlier about the wellness room concept, which is becoming super popular since 2020, when, the practitioners in hospitals, when they were having their own crisis to the point where, things were happening, right? And we've kind of noticed, like, wait a minute, people need a break. Grown-ups need breaks. Wow, that's quite a concept. And not just a break where they can sit and eat for a few minutes, but a break where mentally they can have a safe space to disengage, right? So now a lot of law firms are doing it as well. A lot of corporate agencies, like, it's becoming a whole thing. And I do think that it's very, very important that we keep in mind that social media, I'm not against it, but we do need to be very cognizant of the effects that it has on our youth, right? It is shown to have correlations to different mental health disorders, right? Anxiety disorder, things like that. Depression. What are they looking at? Well, they're looking at people that are using filters. Is this a time in their life where they're most confident? Absolutely not. They're the least confident, and now they're comparing themselves to people that are not even real. And so when we're like, oh, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to go to that social event? Or why don't you want to be why don't you want to talk to people? Why don't you want to interview for that internship? Not just thinking, oh, they're just too lazy to do everything. They just don't want to, you just want to sit on your phone. You're just being lazy. Is that really the problem? Or is there more to it? We have to look at the underlying factors.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
As a parent, as a Generation X parent that is currently dealing with 18 and 16-year-old teenagers, thank you. As I'm sure you ladies can attest to, we didn't come from a generation where all of our emotions were we were able to express them and speak to them and put context behind our feelings. But understanding now, 2024, they have the floor to be able to do so. I guess my question is, what type of tactics would you say that myself and other parents like me could use to engage our kids in the sense of being able to speak not only from the emotion, but from the reality of the moment and what's going on, and help them to be able to navigate around those emotions and come to something definitive?
We don't have a. Oh, okay. Well, my quick suggestion would be to ask more open-ended questions, not questions where you get a yes and no, but to make them dig a little deeper. And I will like one person.
Had in the school system was maybe implementing in the curriculum media literacy. If we're going to, our children are going to continue to use social media. It's going to evolve. And so if we want to keep up with the times, I think that this would be a great time or conversation centered around media literacy and teaching our children what that actually means and embedding that into the curriculum.
If we could just take one more voice, Lexus.
I'll be super fast. Thank you so much. On your note, I had, it's going to sound strange, the luxury of having a child born, with a skull fracture and cerebral palsy. I got to work with a ton of therapists right off the bat. One of them was a speech therapist, and it's going to sound so silly and simple, but when she said to me, we're going to teach her how to identify her emotions, right? What you're feeling, I can see that you're frustrated. Have you ever seen a 3-year-old just have a meltdown over
Yes.
a cereal box?
Yes.
Right? I remember feeling that way, you guys. I did not have parents that did what we're talking about right now. They'd just yell at you for being upset. But it's in part, I was like, I don't even know what I'm feeling right now. I feel like I could explode. And then you're told it's wrong. So like you don't know what that feeling is. I understand this is frustrating. I can see that you're sad. Do you want to talk about it? Here's some things that we can do about it. Or even just, my son was so embarrassed the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, can I tell you? I did something so embarrassing the other day too. And his face relaxed, because like, yeah, adults do that too. And I think that everything you guys are saying is so critical, but we have to start at the very beginning with being able to identify what it is that we're feeling so that we can communicate those words and then have them validated by teachers and that information passed on to parents and vice versa, what's working, what language is working, and kind of neutralizing the why does it feel weird to have feelings, and just talking about those so that we can string all these higher level, more complex things together. I'll just hit you with the simple things. Why don't we just start with, you know what, I'm sad. Sometimes I'm sad and mad, right? It's like that. I think it's worked so well with my children, but I did not have that growing up, so it never occurred to me until I had the speech therapist, angel woman, tell me, let's just start with red face, angry guy, yellow face, kind of melancholy guy. And I think that should definitely be incorporated in households and in schools. Thanks for letting me.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. All right, thank you.